But with you Thursday morning, just coming up to 10 to 11. And so when you think about all the great things Nottinghamshire has to offer, it may be hard to pick just one. Woollerton Hall, Gallows of Justice, Creswell Crags. The list goes on, really. So I'm surprised that new research is suggesting people in Nottingham are in the top 5 of those unhappy with where they've been living during lockdown. Dr. Peter Brooks is a behavioural scientist and has been looking into this for you. And morning to you. And
Good morning.
What sort of things then have you found generally make people unhappy and have been making people unhappy during the past few months?
Yeah, so our research has been looking at people during lockdown and whether they were looking to move away from the inner city area that they're in and where they might be wanting to move to. And you rightly pointed out, Nottingham, 25% of people told us that they wanted to leave Nottingham post-lockdown. The surprising bit, given you've just pointed out how wonderful the surrounding areas are to Nottingham and the areas of Nottinghamshire and the surrounding counties, and actually 26% of people were keen to get down to the southwest, so making a fairly big lifestyle shift to move out of the area.
And what are the things then that people in, it would seem, the built-up areas of Nottingham and other cities are upset about?
Yeah, so the biggest sense that we got was that about 40% of people wanted to make sure they'd got a large garden, more outdoor space. Actually, about a quarter of people wanted to be near a relative. So actually, there's a bit of a sense that perhaps for younger people and younger families, the cities have been the pull both for employment and the amenities for the family. But actually, now that we've all been apart a little bit more from our families and maybe getting out and being a bit closer to them is one of the more things that we value these days.
So people feel a little bit hemmed in and a little bit cut off, really.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary of what we found from the research.
Does that reflect what people would normally think, or has your research shown any sense that people have changed during lockdown?
So I think there's definitely a sense that this has become more aware for people. There's a sort of increase in people's consciousness of this. And I don't know what your listeners have necessarily experienced, but if you went from maybe spending a couple of hours in the evening before bed in your own home to spending most of your waking hours in your own home, you start to look around and go, maybe there's something different that I wanted. And if I'm going to be spending more time here because perhaps your job can be done a little bit more remotely, or you're not going to commute quite so much, I think that awareness just becomes a little bit more heightened. So I think they're themes you probably see all the time, but lockdown has probably brought more of it to the surface.
It has, I think, sort of focused people's thoughts on where they live. It has also given people an opportunity to venture a little further, because Andrew in Bingham, thank you very much indeed for your text, says, since lockdown, I've been out cycling and discovered some beautiful villages, along with watching the wildlife around the river at Gunthorpe as the sun goes down. Life doesn't get much better. And Andrew's in Bingham, which is a nice little market town in Nottinghamshire, and he's sort of discovered the treats and delights on his doorstep. So perhaps those who are dissatisfied with city and suburban life need to, as the phrase goes, get out more. Of course, that's been very difficult, and people still aren't entirely sure what is and isn't right thing to do. As somebody who's interested in the way people behave, Peter Brooks, a behavioural scientist, what do you think the impact of lockdown, and particularly for those who feel a little bit annoyed, will be? Is it going to have a long-term impact on people's personalities, on society? That's a huge question for you.
It's a huge, huge question, and one I don't think we're going to know the answer to for a very long time.
Well, that's a great answer, isn't it? A massive question, and the most sensible answer. We just don't know. But it must be fascinating from your perspective to think about what you will be learning then.
Totally. I've been really fortunate to, across my career, spend 13 years working, inside a large bank, and I got to be on the inside during the financial crisis, at the end of 2008.
You work for a bank?
I do.
Why would a bank have a behavioural scientist?
Well, I think the interesting thing is that everything that people do with their money is all about some of the mistakes we make, because we don't want to think about money. So we use various rules of thumb to avoid having to think too hard about stuff. And actually that causes us to make some mistakes, and we can manage our money better if I can design stuff that protect you against some of your own mistakes. But also, in terms of this research about mortgages, understanding people's attitudes can help us understand what people value and where the latest hotspots might be, and where people might want to find themselves moving towards.
Wow. Fascinating work that you've done. I never knew banks employed such folk. And you mentioned the Southwest. Is that where you would say is the happiest place under lockdown?
We didn't test whether it was the happiest. It was possibly we could sort of infer that it's where people from the cities think they will be happiest post-lockdown. Because Birmingham, most people wanted to go to the southwest. London, the same. Nottingham was the same, and it featured also for people from Manchester as well. So maybe if you got that holiday home in Devon, Cornwall, or Somerset, maybe it's going to go and get a little bit more popular.
Interesting stuff. Thank you very much indeed. And go Southwest, as village people once sang, and I shouldn't have done. It's 4 minutes to 11.